Good morning, everybody. Great to see you. Happy Wednesday, June 1st. Hard to believe that we're 20 days away from the first day of summer. And what a year it's been so far, and what an interesting year it's going to be the second half. And I'm super excited for today's conversation with Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices, Nevada Properties top agent, Matt Mullin. Super excited about this conversation because what's really intrigued me about Matt, not just he and his team's 325 closings last year, but really his focus and approach to the business, and the focus on his mindset, his belief system, and his attitude, and how important all that is to the activities and ultimate results. So again, I think the timing is perfect to have this conversation with Matt as we transition into the summer selling season. So let's welcome our guest, Mr. Matt Mullin from BHHS Nevada Properties in Las Vegas. Morning, Matt.
How's it going? Morning. Thanks for
Good.
having
How
me.
you doing down there?
Unbelievable.
Yeah, good, man. Well, I appreciate you carving out some time from sunny, hot Las Vegas for us up here in the Pacific Northwest. So why don't we kick it off with you telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, your history. You got a unique one, so whatever you're willing to share, let's start there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to share that, anything I share today, I'm literally just sharing from my actual experiences and what's worked for me. One of the things that I love about this business, that's awesome about our business, but is also one of the biggest challenges, is figuring out what's right for us personally, what's right for you, because there's a lot of ways to succeed in this business. So whatever I share today, take what you like, leave the rest, find the things that work good for you. But you said something about and sharing from experiences. A mentor of mine said good decisions come from experience, and good choices come from experience, and experience comes from bad choices. So I'm going to share a lot of stuff today that I learned by trial and error. But I was, I had no never even thought I would be in the real estate business when I was, growing up or going through college. I was born and raised out here in Las Vegas. I was a competitive tennis player. I actually met an alum from Princeton University on the tennis courts. And when I was, 16, 17-year-old tennis player, he said, "Oh, what are you thinking about doing for college?" And I said, "I don't know, wherever I get tennis scholarship. My parents can't afford to send me to college." And he said, "Well, what do you think about Princeton?" I was like, "What's Princeton?" And he kind of gave me this stare, but he helped me out and he helped me through the application process. And so I think I got very lucky. I think I might have been a geographic diversification selection, but anyway, I ended up going to Princeton, got a degree in economics, which essentially changed the trajectory of sort of what I was exposed to and the way I thought. And after Princeton, I kind of followed the crowd, went into New York City, and thought, oh, the path to success is through finance. And I got a job in New York City in equity research with Thompson Financial. I was working in Manhattan actually when September 11th occurred. So that event, as bad as it was, it caused me to really look up and question, why am I doing what I'm doing? What's really important to me? Who do I want to be around? All my family was back in Las Vegas. So I decided I want to move back closer to family, looked for a job opportunity out in Las Vegas. And I found a job in corporate finance in the gaming industry. So I spent a couple of years in corporate finance with Caesars Entertainment, at the time Harrah's. And after a couple of years of that, I was really frustrated that I wasn't, getting more opportunity and making more money, and my skills weren't being valued enough. And I was complaining about it to the original friend of mine that helped me get into Princeton, who was a real estate broker, as well as my dad. And they said, "Well, why don't you just get your real estate license?" And I said, "No way I'm ever going to do that." And, 6 months later, I was in real estate school, and that was 19 years ago. So never looked back.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I learned through all of that, my dad gave me advice early on. He's like, "You're never going to have a problem finding something to do." He's like, "You got to find something you love doing, and the rest will take care of yourself." And even through the real estate experience, because 19 years ago I landed in the business and I just started. I didn't know what I didn't know, and I had a big ego, and I just started working with buyers and sellers. And I was an independent agent for 6 years in an independent brokerage, and then decided that wanted to grow a little bit more. And that's when I joined Prudential at the time, and the Berkshire Hathaway company that I'm with now. Been here for the last 12 years.
Yeah.
And I've kind of worn a lot of hats in the business. So I was an independent agent, independent brokerage, independent agent at a branded larger company, and then decided that I actually wanted to be an intentional leader rather than just sell my own business. So that's when I built and designed the group, but then also spent some time managing a brokerage office, the Sahara office out here. as broker branch manager of an office with about 200 agents. So I'm only sharing all of that sort of roadmap because I never would have planned any of it from day one.
Yeah.
But all along the way, taught me a lot of lessons.
Yeah.
What I do enjoy.
Interesting. From Ivy League to Wall Street to real estate, it's an interesting journey. So why don't you take us back to the first couple years, because I think it's always interesting. Last month we had Megan Owens from Omaha, Nebraska, and the number one individual agent there did 100 plus closings, and you and your team did 325 closings last year, but you didn't get in the business and close that many. So take us back to the first couple of years in the business, and how'd you invest your time? What were the disciplines, the activities to grow your business in those first couple years?
So I'm grateful for it now, but when I started in the business, I didn't know what I didn't know. And the only thing I did know when I first got started in the business was you show up at the office at 8:00, because I worked corporate jobs for 3 years before getting into real estate. So basically that's all I did when I first got started. I just showed up in the morning at 8:30, sat down at my computer. I was like, okay, what do I need to do? What's next? and I know that I'm not earning a paycheck anymore unless I create it. So I just started talking to every single person I knew, and I showed up and I worked business hours basically. And I didn't really have a plan other than talk to everybody that I knew. And I talked to everybody I used to work with in the gaming industry. I made sure that, I sent emails, text messages, phone calls all day long. Hey, just checking in. How are you doing? Here's my new business. I'm in the real estate business now. Just that short, simple message. And, but really, I think early on, the most impactful thing where it really got started was working the network that I had. So I worked in the gaming industry, and every week, the people that I worked with, there was like a rotating happy hour, and we'd always get together at happy hours. And, one of the early lessons I learned was accidentally, by trial and error, was activity breeds activity. So I showed up to the happy hours, made sure I was talking to people, made sure everybody that knew that I had made a job change and a career change and I could help with real estate needs. And, I never know. That's why I shared that I have a little motto: beliefs drive behaviors, which drive results. Whatever I'm thinking drives the way I behave every single day, and the way I behave every single day drives the results I get. So that early belief of I didn't realize at the time, activity breeds activity. I showed up to these happy hours, and I shared with a guy that I work with, oh yeah, I can help you with, because, people are moving all over the country in the gaming industry that I used to work with. I said, I can help with any real estate need anywhere in the country.
Yeah.
I said that at one point in time. I never know when the activity is going to pay off, which is one of the frustrating things of business. That's why I focus on what I can control, the daily activities. But I got a call from him about 7 months later after I made that comment. He's like, hey, we're buying our retirement home in Southern California. I was like, oh, congratulations. He's like, well, you said to call you. And I was like, oh. I was like, oh yeah. And I asked him questions and helped him out. I referred him to an agent in Southern California. And, little did I know that one statement consistently done at happy hour would be, $5,500 referral check several months later.
Yeah.
So, those were the early days. Just show up and talk to people.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are the lessons learned there that you still apply today? Because obviously almost 20 years later, and business, and I think your evolution, as you shared with me, is like most people, you get in and you're building it and it's growing and you're doing a dozen, then you're doing in the 20s and then the 30s and then the 40s and then, that next evolution. So what is it that those lessons you learned early on that fast forward 19, 20 years later that you apply today?
Well, when I first got started in the business, my dad and one of his closest friends, who was also, highly experienced real estate broker, gave me two pieces of advice. They said, people do business with people they like and trust, and answer your phone. And I didn't realize how wise that was, actually, because my first listing I ever got was from one of those networking happy hours, and it was somebody I used to work with, was getting relocated. The second listing that I got was a neighbor 3 doors down who called on the sign, just curious to see what was going on with that house and the price. And he said, after I talked to him for a few minutes, asked some questions, he said, "Well, you're the only one that answered your phone, so I'm working with you."
Wow.
And that was my second listing. But I think ultimately one of the biggest lessons that I didn't realize early on, but I realize now, is that company matters. One of the lessons is company and presentation matters. Early on, I was an independent agent at an independent brokerage, and I didn't think it was important to really focus on quality of listing presentation. People are just going to do business with me because they like me and trust me. I heard that early on. Well, a little more matters than that, because I went on a listing presentation with a former coworker, and I thought I nailed it. I was finally starting to know my stuff. I felt more experienced in the business. It was a few years in, and I left the presentation after meeting with them thinking, oh, 100%, I nailed that. I knew all my numbers. I knew exactly what was going on in the market. It was all what I know. And I didn't get it. I didn't get the listing. And I called him and I said, well, I just love some feedback. Is there anything I could have done differently to earn the business? He's like, oh, Matt, we love you. We've just never heard of Bengal Realty and Investments. And they listed with a branded company. Doesn't matter to everybody, but it matters to some, and that was enough for me. And I decided, you know what, that's not happening again. We're gonna be more prepared for these meetings and bring it all. And I think something else I learned early on was, and I heard this early from my original broker, and I didn't really understand at the time, but some transactions and they will proceed to close despite our best efforts to mess them up and despite our worst fears of what we think might happen. because this is one of those belief shifts that I've had. I used to believe I had way more control than I actually do.
Yeah.
Can't predict the future. I've realized I'm horrible at predicting the future, actually.
Yeah.
And so I had back in the day, you talked about the market changes. Back when the market was, I'm actually grateful because I feel like I got trained at both extremes.
Yeah.
So when I first got started, it was the last time we had a super low supply market, seller's market, buyers fighting over properties, and that's when I had mostly just buyers.
Yeah.
People writing offers on cars, and I was fighting for my buyers. Then finally, I started getting some listings when no listings would sell. Well, some always did, but at that point in time, we had 24,000 on the market and only 800 selling every single month. And it was so I had this seller that we were on the market for 6-7 months as the market was at that toughest buyers, high inventory, low sales. We were on the market for 7 months, and we finally had a pretty sophisticated cash buyer come to the table, and we were in escrow, and it was, the buyer knew that they had a lot of leverage in those particular market conditions and asked for a lot of inspections, and the seller was kind of frustrated. Day before closing, the buyer does a walkthrough after the seller's moved out and says, I want the whole house repainted. I want everything redone. I don't like, there's nail holes here, and I don't like where, and the seller just lost it, frustrated on me. And at the time, I used to have the belief I control all things. I'm the expert. All this is a result of my efforts. But what I learned in that situation is, just listen. And I provided options and asked questions. Well, what's your ideal outcome right now? What alternatives do you have? How about we go back on the market? I mean, he had 5 price reductions and sat on the market for 7 months. I'm pretty sure he didn't want to go back on the market. But one of the biggest lessons I've taken in this business is I do not know what is right for another human being. That's a belief shift I had. My job is not to have all the answers. My job is to ask really, really good questions of the person in front of me to help them get clarity. So I did that. I just listened and asked them some questions. And despite me thinking, oh, this isn't going to go through, and I'm responsible for controlling all this, I just asked a couple questions. He called me back a few hours later. He said, I appreciate those questions you asked. That really helped me get clear. Let's just close.
Yeah.
And it closed fine a couple days later.
Yeah, you've shared that with me, and you actually, I believe, have that on your wall in your office. This statement that questions attract, statements repel, and I think that's a really powerful thought process and philosophy to run your business by. So, in your nearly 20-year career, so you've obviously navigated multiple markets. One, the boom of '02 to '07. Then the Great Recession of '08 to 2012. Now the historic decade that we're all recently enjoying. And then right now, the inevitable, what I would call the recalibration of the current market that we're starting to experience begin. So what lessons through 3 market shifts, and then a fourth one that I would say right now is just recalibrating, given the past 2 years, but the larger 10-year run that we're on. What are the lessons that you've learned through navigating multiple market changes? What are the constants, irrespective of the type of market and economy? And then lastly, what are you and your team doing today in response to the adjustments taking place in the market? So I know it's a loaded question, but I really want to focus in on the fact that you've operated through multiple markets. We're in the process, I believe, of recalibrating a new one. And so what are the lessons learned doing that? What are the constants, regardless of market and economy? And then what are you and your team doing today in response to those adjustments?
So one thing that I shared earlier, that beliefs are so important to me, and I didn't always have these beliefs. These are beliefs early on that I learned through experience. I had to change. So the questions attract, statements repel was one of those beliefs, because early on I thought, no, I'm the expert. I'm supposed to have all the answers. Everybody expects me to know what's going to happen, and what's the value of the house, and what's the price, what's it going to sell at, when's it going to close. So shifting that belief to right now, I believe it applies to all markets, is my job is not to have the answers. It's actually to ask really, really, really good questions. My job is to ask great questions and help the person in front of me get clear on what the right decision is for them. Because, like I said, that belief, I don't know what's right for another human being, I believe that applies to all markets. Early on, I made the mistake. Early on, I had another former colleague from Caesars, Harris at the time, call me with a job relocation. And I made assumptions and didn't ask questions. And I got on the phone and he said, hey, I'd love you to help my wife and I sell our house. We're relocating to the East Coast. I said, great. I went by the house. I said, oh, he's a corporate finance guy. He's going to love the numbers. So I went through all this analytical presentation on numbers and market conditions and pricing strategy and all this stuff, because, my strength is numbers. That's my background. So I lean into it. And I didn't get the listing. And I called him and I after I said, I'd love some feedback. What could I have done to earn the business? And he said, we actually had a little bit of a fight about this. I love you. He's like, I would have hired you tomorrow, but I'm gone. My wife is the one that's staying here in Las Vegas dealing with this home sell. And she felt a little bit more comfortable with the other agent that we interviewed that, was more her style. Well, that questions attract, statements repel, and my job is to ask great questions would have changed that situation, because I wasn't going to make that mistake again. Yeah. So I got another exact same situation with a relocating, and I first question I asked when I got on the phone with the relocating executive, he was moving back east, same situation. I asked him, just curious, what's the most important factor you're looking for as you interview professionals for the job of selling your home? And he's like, wow, that's a good question. Nobody's asked me that question before. And he said, hey, honestly, Matt, I'm gone. I'm going to be on the East Coast. So it's, whoever can help my wife the most and whoever can get along with what her needs are and make the process as easy as possible for her. So the way I showed up was a totally different approach because I asked a really good question. And I believe that customization matters. I went and I didn't say anything about numbers, but I sat and listened to what the concerns were of the move and the stresses and provide options and solutions and let her make the decisions. And sure enough, she signed, I said, again, a question, what's the best next step? And she said, well, where do we sign? Let's start right now.
Yeah, nice.
I've made that mistake before too. I didn't ask what's the best next step, and they were ready to sign a listing 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. So do you have, out of curiosity, do you have a set? Because you and I've talked how you really try to create a customized solution. That's the presentation that you give, that you want to treat every customer. And let's face it, you and your team had 325 last year alone. Creating a custom experiences could be challenging that way. But do you have a specific set of questions in that interview, or is it you do tailor that by client?
Yeah, no, we have a very specific list of 12 questions and 3 kind of go-tos all the time that we talk about every single time. This is the list of questions to ask every single time you have the very first conversation. Here's some to ask in the first 5 minutes. Here's what you ask when you show up face to face. So we know what to expect and how to provide the best customized approach to the client. We believe not every client wants the same thing. Not everybody has the same risk tolerance. Not everybody has the same fears and concerns. So our job is to really understand that. That was one of the things I learned early on. A mentor of mine said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I thought knowledge and education was all that mattered showing up on these, but it was more the process of asking these questions. And I think one of the big lessons, I'm happy to share those too. I'll send them to you. But
well, I was going to put you on the spot, Matt, and I kind of teed that up, not knowing if you had that. But now that you showed your hand, I'm going to ask, if you can email me that so I can distribute to our company. That'd be great.
Yeah, and I think a big takeaway from all of that too was a lesson I heard from a branch manager early on at the Green Valley office out here. His name is John Joseph. Said early on, one of the first sales meetings I showed up, generate so you don't have to tolerate. And that resonated so much through the market cycles, because when the market shifts, my activities have to shift. And that's a belief that I changed. Early on, I actually did think that my business was going to be driven by the market. Right. But I changed my belief to there's always enough business, regardless of market. And I have to figure out how I'm going to generate so I don't have to tolerate, things I can't control. I can't control when somebody's going to be ready for a decision. I can't control if it's the right decision for them or not. So we have back in that, when the market came down in 2009, a lot of short sales and REOs. Yeah. We were having to work on 2 times as many transactions to actually close the same amount, and on every single one we were earning 40% less. So we had to adjust through generation activities. My rule of thumb that we talk about regularly on the group every single week is how healthy is your pipeline, because we believe that the pipeline, you need to have 3 to 4 times the conversations and opportunities and potential going on at any given point in time. 3 to 4 times the amount that you want to have an escrow, because everybody's got different goals too. Right. If you want a couple homes in escrow at any given point in time, 3 to 4 times that, 6 to 8 right now opportunities that you're talking to daily, weekly. Yeah. If you want 5, it needs to be more like 15 to 20.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
I love those 2 statements or comments. Health of your opportunity pipeline. It's such a good, mindset, just the opportunity pipeline. I love that thought. But then your managing brokers statement way back when, generate so you don't have to tolerate, generate consistently so you create choices and options for yourself. I love that.
Yeah, that's my focus now. So I focus on how do I make decisions and filter through all I can control are my daily activities,
Yeah.
and are they aligned with what I actually want? Um, I had three questions from a coach: Who are you? What do you want? What price are you willing to pay? So I've boiled things down to an ideal day, routine measured in activities, not results. I know the results are going to take care of themselves if I have
Right.
the activities aligned,
Yeah.
but the activities, they change. They change with goals and time. I mean, I had one set of activities before kids,
Yeah.
and now I've got three kids, and 12, 12, and 11, and we had three kids under 2 years old. I I had to figure out fast how to do real estate differently if I was going to stay in it, or if I wanted to have a relationship with my family.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well,
um,
that's a good segue into describe your ideal day. And obviously, you just alluded to it. It's changed, right? I mean, life events kind of determine or dictate how we adjust our schedules and routines. So, what is you've got twin daughters that are 12 and a son who's 11. So that's an active household. And then obviously a big thriving business. So, describe your ideal day. What are the specific disciplines and activities of you and your team members?
so I will oversimplify, because for me, sometimes I need to, as the analytical, and sometimes the simplest thing is the easiest to actually execute on. But I read a book that was really impactful called Four Disciplines of Execution. And that book talks about having a scoreboard and boiling your whole day down to a simple set of lead measure activities, because the activities are what's going to actually drive the results. So for me, my ideal day, and it's a constant, this is a constant shifting thing based on, life happening. I expect chaos now, basically. But, for me, my ideal day is a balance of time for myself, time with my family, time on the business, time serving others, serving associates. So I've boiled mine down to a few simple, measurable lead measure activities. For me, it's 221. I have my 221 numbers. Every single day, I need to talk to at least two associates on the group to make sure that I'm connecting, they're focused, helping with challenges. What are they focused on this week? Helping them get clear on their lead measure activities. I need to have two conversations generating opportunities for the group, new business conversations. And I need to have one with an associate, fellow professional that's not on the group, for future relationships and future potential associates for the group. Those, I boiled everything down to, if I just do those three things from a business standpoint, the business remains healthy because I know I'm doing that activity. Back to that happy hour story. It was really a lead measure. Talk
Yeah.
to X amount of people a day. A couple other examples of associates on the team. I had one associate who had gotten so clear that she loved generating business from open house activities and measured the results. She's like, I know that every 8 hours of open house, I'm going to generate a closing. I know that math because I've done it over several months. And sure enough, every single 8 hours of open house held, she had enough conversations going in the pipeline that led to a closing. I had another associate nailed down to where I know every single 10 conversations I have from inbound internet ads, I'm going to generate a closing. But it really boiled down to knowing the numbers and knowing conversions, and and defining personally what success is for you, because
Wow.
my ideal day has shifted, and you know the activities needed to earn 500,000 a year in commission income is different than the activities needed to earn 200,000 a year. So um, those are a few examples, but
So you guys, as we've talked, you guys have focused really on your database, then social media, what you called your social media power hour. I'd love to hear more about that, but that's within your sphere. Open houses, direct mails, internet, meaning Google paid ads. Those are the four activities you and your team really focus on. So your sphere of influence, open houses, direct mail, and Google paid ads, right?
yeah. Well, that's one of the things too. A belief I have: all methods work to some degree. That's why I talk about the belief that I shifted is they all work. It's just pick the one that aligns to you personally, your budget, your ideal day. If you want to be in person talking to people, um, I had an associate that spent 3 months phone prospecting, cold calls, and calling internet ad and never connected to a database, and had a huge local database, almost quit the business and called and said, I don't like this business. And we started talking. I was like, well, what would you like to do? So I'd love to just help friends and family. And well, what have you been doing with all your friends and family? Nothing. So we changed the lead measure activity to 2 coffee meetings a week with key influencers in the database. And 6 months later, had the most business going on he had, was enjoying the business again, was spending time, with passions. So I think they all work. It's about finding that clarity. But one thing that we are really ramping up to is client appreciation event process. So
Yeah.
I, real quick on that.
Yeah.
Okay. We did one earlier this spring, and what really impacted me, that convinced me to do it, was I heard Vince in Omaha, Vince Lacey, say, you get 100% credit with your entire database for the invitation. Only 20 or 30% are going to show up, but you're getting credit with 100% of your database for the invitation. That was the thing that kind of stuck with me.
Yeah.
And we did an event in the spring. We did a family picnic out in the park in one of the neighborhoods out here. We had people in the neighborhoods actually looking, wow, who is this? What are you guys doing? And oh, you're a real estate group. That's awesome that you do this. So that was an unintended positive impact of it. But the reach out process was the most valuable part of it. I mean, I sent an email invitation to 500 people in my database and got 1 RSVP. I started panicking a little bit. So I got on the phone and I started texting. I spent 2 hours texting and calling and inviting people.
Yeah.
And within 2 hours, I had 60 RSVPs. And one called me back and said, wow, it's been a long time. I really appreciate, I can't make the event, but man, your timing is perfect. We're looking at making change right now. So someone didn't even show up. The event was a right now piece of business just from reaching out and inviting them.
That's awesome. So you're going to do 2 client appreciation events annually, a spring and fall, I think you've shared with me. Describe to me real quick because you've shared this with me, your social media power hour. I mean, the actual, how you leverage social media in what intentional way?
So I'm not quite sure. I'm not a social media expert.
I don't know who is.
But I view that as my database. I mean, those are my relationships. Those are the people that I know, that I'm connected to. So I decided, I'm going to spend an hour a day, not just scrolling down social media, or not just posting and hoping that people are going to see what I'm sharing. I just decided, I'm going to spend an hour a day liking, commenting, engaging, congratulating, and actually go to my friends list, people's things I don't see in the feed, go to my friends list and basically prospect. I go down my list and I'll connect. And it's one of the most energizing things too. I mean, I just connecting with people I haven't talked to in a while, sending messages, commenting on their posts, seeing what's up in their life. Just a simple 5 to 10 people or an hour at a time that I haven't talked to, that I'm not seeing on the feed. And what I found was, the more I do that and the more I comment and like and engage and proactively go seek them versus hope they show up in the feed, now all of a sudden they are seeing the things I'm regularly putting out about real estate. I got 3 referrals so far this year purely from that.
Yeah.
And people I hadn't talked to in 5-6 years.
Yeah. I mean, I think the powerful takeaway is it's just a medium, it's just an activity, but you're leveraging it. And let's say it's the most cost-effective way to connect, right? I mean, you just leverage what people are putting out there and engaging them in how where they're present. And I think that's the powerful takeaway, is how do you leverage that medium to impact your business and ultimately your relationships with people? So what advice? I mean, we're obviously getting back to kind of the marketplace and the recalibration that I would say is defining what we're experiencing today. So what advice or counsel are you giving your clients, sellers and buyers today, given what's going on in the marketplace?
I think it boils down to ultimately one of those core principles of asking really good questions. I mean, I'm actually, this sounds a little, well, I guess it is a form of advice. I'm not giving them any advice because I found that I'm horrible at predicting the future, like I said earlier, but I can ask really great questions. And I view that's one of the belief shifts. My job is to ask really good questions. But the questions I'm asking now are changing a little bit because the market's changing. I'm asking people long-term questions. How satisfied are you going to be in this home that you're in for the next 10 years or 5 years? Or what is your ideal housing goal over the next 5 to 10, 15 years? So essentially getting people longer thinking. I'm in a house now that I had no intention of buying. As a real estate professional, I was sitting with a friend after a tennis, and we had just had our third child. And I was thinking Warren Buffett style, I'm never going to move ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he just said, you might not be happy in that house with three teenagers. I mean, I had twins that were, 15 months old and a newborn. I don't know if you're gonna be happy in the house with three teenagers. And I said, yeah, he might be right. And I just glanced on the computer that night, like 2 hours later. So I woke up one morning, not even thinking about buying a house. And at 48 hours later, we were under contract on the home that we're in now. We bought in 2011, and but it wasn't even a thought process.
Yeah.
But a good question got me thinking about it, which led to decisions and action. So advice right now is really good questions about longer term thinking.
Yeah.
And then one thing I learned from one of my mentors at this company, Mark Stark, is always break it down to real dollars. Because it's overwhelming to think, I don't want to make a wrong decision, or the market. I've been doing this for 19 to 20 years, and I can count on one hand how many people buying and selling homes have actually made a decision based on market timing.
Yeah.
Versus deciding what was the right lifestyle move for them at the time.
Yeah.
And breaking it down to the real dollars. Well, what's the dollar impact of that? Gets the real conversation started. Well, if the market goes down 10%, what does that mean? Oh, that amount of dollars. Well, how much are you going to pay where would you live if you weren't here? Well, I'd be here. How much would that cost you? The minute you break things down to real dollars, the decisions, and you ask good questions, the decisions come faster and more clear.
Yeah. Well, it's really, you've reinforced that multiple times just through this Q&A, that it's really about putting them in the driver's seat through really questions and getting them to a place where they've arrived at, this is what's important, this is what I need to have happen, and this is why. And then you put together the strategy and execute. I mean, I think boiling it down as simple as it can be is your whole focus and your team's focus is you're interviewing, you're going out on the interview, but you're doing the interviewing, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what advice would you give a fellow realtor today? I mean, given, where it's unprecedented what we're going through, right? I mean, a 10-year run up, and then the last 2 years, just like on a rocket ship. And now, again, what I would consider more recalibration of the market. What advice would you give any realtor, those on your team, those in your office, those in your company, those on today? Because really the market, the part of the country you're in doesn't really matter. I mean, conditions are pretty similar everywhere. So what advice would you give someone today?
I got these, I call them the evil questions because I got them from a coach of mine. So my advice would be, ask yourself these questions. Who are you? What do you want? When do you want it? And what prices are you willing to pay to get it? And ultimately, that's just figure out what's right for you, and don't compare yourself to other people and other successful plans. And, those questions got me clear and caused a lot of the changes over my whole, how am I going to spend the minutes of my day based on those things? Because, clarity on what prices am I willing to pay? I wasn't willing to pay I wasn't willing to pay the price of missing out on my kids' childhood.
Yeah.
So I had to change the whole way I approached the business to get the same amount of work done or more in a fraction of the time. And I think that the biggest positive that came out for me is that I was able to, and I saw this, I don't remember where I saw it, but it really resonated with me. Design your real estate business for you and your lifestyle, and not vice versa. And there's unlimited ways to do it. It's just about working through those questions and getting clear and picking what's right for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, listen, man, we're at 40 minutes and I try to be sensitive to your time as a guest and those watching in. A couple great takeaways. I know, and I will just tell everybody you've been so generous in the times that we've talked and your willingness to share. I'm going to share your contact information with our team. And I know you've welcomed anybody to reach out to you afterwards if they've got questions. And so we'll make sure and share your information. You're going to share with us your interview questions, which everybody will be excited to review. But just some of the key takeaways. I think what I'm most impressed with you, Matt, is just your commitment to your mindset and attitude and your belief system, and then that really dictates everything else. And it's more about process and approach and the results will just take care of itself. But you guys have clarity around how you generate business, meaning your database, social media, open houses, direct mail, internet, Google paid ads in particular. But ultimately just be a good interviewer, get to know your clients and what their needs, wants, expectations are, and then formulate a strategy and approach to execute on those. So really appreciate the time and advice and wish you and your family continued success and look forward to seeing you in person soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Jason.
All right, bud. Have a great rest of the day.
You too.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I'll make sure to gather that information from Matt and deploy it out to everybody. So everybody have a great June 1st and a great summer selling season. Take care.